Nope, there it is. Sorry, that's me. I figured it out. Too many buttons, even for me. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to shut this off. Did you find that plug-in? Do you see it?
It's still opening.
Okay.
Reading. Big session.
No, there it is. No, there it is. There we go. Oh, geez. Oh, sorry, that's me. I figured it.
It's me twice, sorry. Okay, we'll just put it in the chat if you look for it. It should be under the audio suite menu under Dynamics. Okay, so back to the stream. So the thing here is that this is a compressor called the 1176, which is why it's the BF76 and the CLA76, because this is a clone of a very popular compressor. Now, this compressor came out in the late 60s before things had really been locked down in terms of how engineers wanted to interact with equipment. So it's kind of weird the way it interacts. First thing you're going to notice about this being a compressor is that there is no threshold control, which is a little confusing. There is a threshold, however, you cannot adjust it. So instead of you changing the threshold in relationship to the input, you change the input in relationship to the threshold. So as a result, if you use this compressor, you have to turn up the input to get more compression, and then you need to turn down the output to match that level. So let me back out here a little bit and let me show you that. I'm going to get rid of this one because I don't need it to happen twice. Okay, so I've got a bass here. I should have a bass. Why don't I have a bass? What? Why not? What's going on here? Oh, there we go. Okay, so there's my bass. Actually, let me do that because I didn't make up enough output gain here. If I turn down the input, it's not doing anything because I'm not hitting the threshold. So let me turn up the input until it starts doing something. Okay, now it's doing something. But my level's not quite right, so I'm going to change the output so that it matches bypass. That's a little too loud. Okay, so you'll have the you'll have to adjust the input to get it to actually activate. So you're moving the input to push into the threshold. That's how you actually get it to start working. And then you adjust the output so that the level is the same regardless of whether it's bypassed or active, so that you can actually make a good comparison to whether you like the sound or not. and then you can move on. So normally you would just move the threshold and then the output wouldn't change that much. But again, this was an early design, so they didn't really think that far ahead. The next thing is I'm going to skip these knobs for a second, and I'm going to come over here. These are your ratios. You get 4-to-1, 8-to-1, 12-to-1, or 20-to-1, and that's all you get. You can't have 6-to-1. You can't have 7-to-1. It doesn't exist. So that's where you make your selections. But having said that, when they designed gear back then, they were designing it on a very practical level. People weren't tending to use 6-to-1, so they didn't bother putting an option. So a lot of times when you look at older gear or software replications of older gear, it might be limited, but there's a reason that it's limited. It's just, if it's only got a couple options, it's usually because those are the good options, basically. Okay, so there's one other option. You're going to see there's an all button. If you click on that, what this actually did on the physical device is it would push all the buttons in at once. And as you probably saw on the needle just then, it goes from compressing to being insane. So I'm going to turn it up and try that real quick. So it gives it an insane amount of compression. It distorts it a little bit. It's a little gritty sounding. If you're doing a rock and roll mix, that totally can fit in the vibe. A lot of times people will put this on some of their drum mics and just crush the crap out of them. So it does have a practical use. But for normal use, you would just obviously pick one of these ratios. Now, here is the weirdest part about the 1176, and this can confuse people a lot. You would imagine that 1 would result is, what is 1? 10 milliseconds, and maybe this is 70 milliseconds or something. No, these numbers are completely arbitrary on the attack and release. And not only that, you would usually think that this is slow and this is fast. I'm sorry, that this would be fast because it would be like 10 milliseconds and this would be slow. It's the opposite. The higher the number, the faster the compressor is reacting, which is backwards for most other compressors. Okay? So you crank this up, it is as fast as it's ever going to get. The 7 is irrelevant. It doesn't mean anything. It just means it's one of 7 options. Okay? So, same thing with the release. The fastest release time is 7. If I move this here, see how quickly the needle's reacting? Because I'm as fast as I'm going to get. If I make that slower, the needle is a lot smoother because it's reacting more slowly. Okay, so with all this in mind, this compressor is insanely famous. So case in point, I'm going to jump back to, this is the picture. Okay, this is Chris Lord-Alge's home, not his home studio, his actual studio. And he has mixed Kiss, Aerosmith, Green Day, just everybody. So the thing I want to point out is if you look in his rack, there's 4 Blue Stripe 1176s. There's 2 what they call blackface 1176s. There's 3 more blackface 1176s. These are what they call silver-face 1176s. There's 2 more of these. These 2 are silver-faced stereo 1176s. 2 more silver-faced 1176s. And another 2 off-brand 1176s. Obviously, he likes these compressors. It's because they are industry standards. Everybody uses that compressor on pop and rock mixes. You cannot get away from those things in a pop and rock mix. They work. That's why they're so popular, because they really work well. I wouldn't use them for something like ukulele or a symphony or something like that. But if it's more aggressive, then absolutely you should check these things out. You can use them on anything. Now, there is a setting, a famous setting called the Dr. Pepper setting for the 1176. If you don't know where to start, there was an old advertisement of Dr. Pepper that said you should drink a Dr. Pepper at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 4 p.m. to get you through your day, which is a hell of a lot of caffeine, but that's what they were saying in the late 60s and 70s, that how much Dr. Pepper you should be drinking, 3 cans a day. Now, what they take from that is the 10, 2, and 4. Don't ignore the numbers, but you're going to put the attack at 10 o'clock, the release at 2 o'clock, which ends up being 3 and 5 if you want to do that. 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and a 4-to-1 ratio. If you set your 1176 like that at the Dr. Pepper setting, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and a 4-to-1 ratio, you will, the bass isn't playing in this part of the song right now, but, and you set your input so that your threshold is picking up a little bit of the instrument. Give it a second. The bass will show up here in a second. And I just get, oops, that's too much. And I just get a little bit of compression. This setting will always work on pretty much anything you put this on. As a matter of fact, you know what? I'm going to take this exact same plugin, and if you hold the Option key and drag it, you can actually put it on, I'm going to get rid of that other plugin. You can put it on you can copy it over to another place. So now let's listen to the vocal. Same settings, same compressor, same settings.
want to be flying high in the sky. Flying high in the sky.
Sounds great on vocals too. That Dr. Pepper setting will work on almost anything. So if you don't know where to start, that's a good place to start. And then from there, I'd start changing your attack and release and ratios and see if you can find something you like better. But this setting will always serve you well. Okay, so I'm going to stop and let the stream catch up. Okay, cool. I see my voice on the meters. Okay, now I've got my folder. You're going to see a PTX file that is in here. Don't use it. It's going to cause you problems. Don't use it. If you see it in there, get rid of it. Don't use it. Just use the audio files. Okay? We're going to grab all that. Drag and drop. Oops, sorry. Not on the right window to do that. If you have to drag and drop. If you're going to drag and drop, you have to do it into the edit window, not the mix window. It's going to spot it all right where it goes. Beautiful. Okay, let me move my cut-in screen. Okay, so I'm going to just play you a very quick snippet of this, and I'm going to try to make a quick mix in Pro Tools here. Oh, kick drum.
Retracing my own steps.
So as you can see, tons and tons of space in this mix. So let me organize my session a little bit. And I actually would really like for you guys to start doing this too. There's going to be way too much crap in here for you to deal with in the order that it comes in, because it tends to come in alphabetical order. So I'm going to find my kick, find my way kick. There we go. There's JG left, JG right. I shouldn't have named it left and right. That is my mistake. If I recall correctly, I'm pretty sure that the left one is the one for the snare, and the right one is the one that should be panned to the right. So I shouldn't have named JG left left. It should be JG center. Okay, and then I have bass. We'll explain the G2, mag, and pi here in a second. There's my high tom. I'm going to move that. Strings, lead, mag. Low tom is going to go back. Whoops, no, low tom's going here. Under snare, so that's my snare drum. I felt that there was enough snare in the overheads that I didn't need to put a top mic, but I wanted the rattle of the snares, so I did that. I mic'd it underneath. And I'm going to move my bass back by my drums, because that's a pretty typical thing to do. Actually, wait, no, that's fine. Oh, I see what I want to do. I want to move my keys over here. Okay. Here's something else that I think I've neglected to talk about, color coding. So I'm going to highlight, I'm going to click on this guy, and then I'm going to hold shift and click on this. That highlighted all my drums. If I double click over here in this track color code bar, this pops up. Okay? Whoa, I didn't want to move that audio. This pops up. This box here needs to be highlighted, needs to be on. Saturation needs to be up and brightness needs to be down. But now what I can do is I've selected all my drums, and I'm going to choose to make them one specific color. Oh, why is it not? Hold on a second. Oh, I see what's happening. Hold on a second. So, one of the things you're going to want to check is the preferences menu. Track type and track color. That should be right. Okay, something weird is going on here. Okay, so I am selected on my channels. I apologize. This is highlighted. There we go. It must have been because I was highlighted on the audio track. I guess I've never really caught myself that way. Learn something new every day. Okay, so these are my drum tracks. I'm going to make them brown. I'm going to make my bass blue. I'm going to make these two tracks dark green because they are a rhythm guitar. I'm going to make these two tracks light green. That's odd. I'll have to look at that later. That's really weird. I've never seen it do that. Honestly, I'll have to look into that. So this should be green. As a matter of fact, you know what? I'm just going to change it manually. Okay. And then I have keyboards, which I'm going to make light blue just because that's what I do to them. And then I have vocals. And I've got a bunch of harmony vocals, which I'm going to highlight, and I'm going to make them dark purple. And then I'm going to take my lead vocal, and I'm going to make it bright purple. Okay, so when you color code, it makes your life so much easier to be able to navigate through your session, because when I switch over to my mix window, all of those are color coded too. So now it's real easy for me to see that these are drums. Even though the names are kind of jacked up and I can't tell what they are, I can tell you right now that this is my drum set, this is my bass, guitar, second guitar, keyboards, background vocals, and lead vocal. Okay? Now, you do not have to take my color coding, but here's where my color coding comes from. You want something that's easy to remember. I make my drums brown because a lot of the good drummers I know tend to have drum sets that just have a clear lacquer finish so that you can see the wood grain. So the brown reminds me of the wood grain of a nice drum set. So that's my logic. From there, I have alliteration. Blue for bass, green for guitar, violet for vocals. Okay, that's how I remember it in my head. Yellow I reserve for horns, saxophone, trumpet, tuba, if you have tuba in a rock song. That's all horns, because yellow is the brass of the instruments. That makes sense for me. Or winds. Even if I had a clarinet, it would still be yellow. And then I'm left with a couple other options, and the keyboards have to be something. So honestly, they're the ones that don't make sense. I just choose that aqua. Whoops, I just made my vocal that color. I just choose that aqua blue for my strings. That's or my keyboards, piano, keyboard, synthesizer. That's how I keep it straight. You're going to notice that I didn't use red, and that's intentional because there's a way to actually record your mix back into Pro Tools, and I tend to save red for record. So that's how I do it in my head. Now, again, you can come up with a completely different setup. It doesn't matter. It's whatever works for you. It doesn't really make any difference. It doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. It's just to make your life easier. Now, Fab, the guy from Pure Mix that has the Pure Mix website, uses red for bass and vocals because for him in a big session, he wants to be able to find bass and vocals quickly. And typically you don't put bass next to vocal, so it's easy to tell them apart. It's easy to say, oh, the one towards the top next to the drums is the bass, and the one at the bottom is the vocal. So he uses red because red stands out. So that's his thing. So again, come up with your own thing, but whatever you do, come up with a color coding because the bigger our sessions get, the more that this is going to save your butt. Okay, so now that I've done that, we're going to talk about some reverbs. So I'm going to make a new track. And my new stereo track. Actually, you know what? I'm going to show you something. If I make a mono auxiliary input, I can do that for my reverb. Okay, so this is my reverb, which by default is green. So I tend to double click it and I click none so that I know my reverbs are always gray. It's just, that makes sense for me. Again, you can do whatever makes sense for you. So let me listen to this real quick. Let me figure out. Let me verify what these overheads are supposed to be. Yes, JG left is supposed to be the one that's directly overhead, and this one's supposed to be the one that's panned. Okay? So based on that, because this is kick, snare, my toms, and then my overheads. So let's actually, I'm going to hold that option key and mute everything just because it's the faster way to do this. And then I'm going to unmute my drums. And I'm going to make a quick drum mix. See, lots of snare in that overhead, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to put my floor tom over to the right. And my high tom so that they kind of do a stereo thing when you hit them. Okay, and then I've got my bass. And there's my vocal. Now, there's two guitars, but there are two guitar tracks per guitar. So let me explain why. I used to have a guitar called the Parker Fly. I wish I hadn't sold it, but it looks like this. And the interesting thing about the Parker Fly guitar is that the Parker Fly guitar, oh God, mine was not that expensive. I had the cheap version. Mine was like $400 or $500. Mine was, heck no, mine was not $2,000. This is one of the really nice ones. The cool thing about these is that they have their normal magnetic pickups like most other guitars that you're used to seeing. But inside the bridge, they also had a contact pickup inside the bridge, just like an acoustic guitar would. So you actually had a stereo output on a Parker Fly guitar. So the ones that say G2, that would be guitar 2, mag are the magnetic pickup output, and G2 pi is the piezo pickup output, which is the contact mic. So they sound very different. So this is the sound of the magnetic pickups. This is plugged right into the mixing console. This is the sound of the magnetic pickup, which is what most guitars would sound like. Okay, but this is the sound of the contact mic. Right? Almost sounds like an acoustic guitar. So very different tones that you have for this one instrument. So you can do a couple things with that. You can say, I only want to use one or the other. Totally fair game. Or you can also pan them and get a really cool stereo guitar sound. So you can use those either way that you want to. Okay? Now the next thing is that there is another thing that says lead. So this is the lead line. The guitar solo is insanely simple. It's just a very, very open song. And you can choose whether or not you want to use the individual tracks there as well, or if you want to blend them. So maybe the rhythm guitar is a wide stereo guitar and the solo isn't, or vice versa. That's totally your call, however you want to do it. So the solo, again, is very open with tons of room for reverb. That's all it is. No virtuosic anything going on here. Space for days, which is why this is the perfect track to use reverb on. Okay, so I am going to add a reverb, and I am going to add Deverb, which is the stock reverb that comes with Pro Tools. Now, remember how I made a mono blah, blah, blah. I made a mono auxiliary send for the reverb. I'm going to choose Deverb mono to stereo. And the cool thing is that, ooh, look at this. The track suddenly became stereo. Because even though I'm only going to send a mono input into the reverb, it's going to come out stereo. So it's really useful for that. So again, I'm going to use my Option key. Here's another trick. You might even want to write this down. Hold the Option key. I'm going to click on, holding the Option key, going to click on my sends. And I'm going to say I want to make a bus 1 so that I can send things to that reverb. Holding the Option key, it just put that on every single track for me. Saves you tons of time. Okay? Now, the input of this reverb needs to be that same bus 1. So now whenever I send anything here to this channel, I can send anything I want to the reverb. Okay? So, let me do this because I want to leave this over here. Oh, I'm going to close this window over here because I just do not need it. Ah, that also gets the reverb out from under my picture-in-a-picture. Okay, great. So I need to see these guys. I can do one of two things. I can either click on them and it opens up a little window for me, or I can come up to View, Mix Window Views. I'm sorry, Expanded Sends, Send A. Now I see all those faders. Okay? Useful. The only downside is that it just made my screen that much longer, and now I'm starting to lose things, and I can't see my comments in the bottom. Not a big deal. I could scroll, but just be aware that the more of the stuff you turn on, the more space it takes up. So let's start, and let's look at the solo since we're sitting right there anyway. So with the reverb now, right? Now I got space for days to hear that reverb. Right? So now when you choose a reverb, you're really going to hear what you're choosing. Now, very important. We've talked about EQ and compression. EQ and compression is you're modifying what you already have. When we talk about reverb, it's the first time where the processing you do is adding content. Okay, so all that discussion about making space in your EQs for your different instruments, reverb is another instrument. It takes up a space, it takes up time, it takes up frequencies. You've just added another element to your mix. Compression and EQ processes what you already have. Reverb is a new instrument that you are adding, so you need to think of it that way, right? If you want to hear that reverb more, if you want to hear the twinkly part of that reverb, you got to take some high end out of something because it's going to be in the way otherwise. So don't forget that reverb is more content. It's another instrument. So now I can do all this stuff and I can absolutely cycle through my reverbs. There's my hall. Let's go to church. Yeah, that's a little much, right? Let's try a plate. Still a little much, but not as thick a sound. Every one of these reverbs has a different frequency range that it takes up and a different way that it reacts in time. So you're going to want to play with these to see which ones you like. Maybe you don't want anything big. Maybe you just want a room or even the chamber, which is the ambient. Subtle. And actually I can back this off because I'm really going overboard here. Super subtle, but watch what happens when I kill it. It's subtle, but it just loses a little bit of its depth. So that's my next warning with reverb. A little goes a long way. Don't think that you have to make every reverb obvious, and you don't have to drown it. You just want to add space. Sometimes all you want to do is make it feel like there's a little bit of space behind it. Sometimes makes you want to feel like it should be taking over everything. There's obviously some other things in here that you can put reverb on that are really fun. You've got this little drum hit. Actually, let's go right there. Okay, kind of boring, right? Lot more fun to put a little bit of reverb on that. Now, another third warning that I will give you with reverb, with very few exceptions, because there's exceptions to everything, nobody puts reverb on kick drum and bass. Why? Because when you do, it makes a completely muddy mess. It takes all the definition out of your low end, and especially on small speakers, it just flat out sounds like crap. So you can go ahead, and honestly, I do this all the time just to make sure I don't accidentally do it. I just get rid of the sends on the kick and snare. I'm sorry, not kick and snare, kick and bass, just because I know that I'm not going to want it. Okay? Next thing with this mix that you're going to want to know about is this section right here. It's a bunch of oohs, and it's really not meant to be the main focus of the track, kind of like the Opus example I said earlier. Whoops, I've got them all muted. There's a reason for that. Okay? So here's what they are. It's an interesting chord, but it is not enough to make that mix interesting, in my opinion. I would pull all of this down, because what is the most active part of this particular part of the song? It's this. Right? That's a lot more interesting than ooh. So make sure that that is the focus of this section. Having said that, with reverb and some panning and some stuff, see, you can make a really cool like background pad, which was the entire our entire intent for that section. It was not meant to be a big in front of you, in your face thing. It was always meant to be just this background to support that guitar thing as it happens, and then it takes you into the other the actual guitar solo. Okay, now one of the big trick with this, and this is the truly important part of this, don't start at the beginning and start putting reverb on it, because no automation. I don't want anybody messing with automation yet. I swear this is possible.
Isn't finding my way.
Tons of space for reverb. However, at the end of the song,
I'll fall in line. Every day is just the same.
it actually starts to move like a normal pop song. It actually has a little bit of a groove going on. It's a lot busier at the end. I guarantee it is possible to put interesting reverbs at the beginning that don't mess up the end. So make sure that whatever you do doesn't make the end of the song an ugly mess. Okay? You can do that by being conservative about how much reverb you put on things. You can do that by deciding how loud the reverb actually is. You can do that by even EQing the reverb. There's nothing that says you can't EQ or even compress a reverb. Okay? It is another instrument, so you're more than welcome to do that. Okay? So, when you do this mix, make sure that your reverb works from start to finish. It works from tons of space to hardly any space in the mix. It is possible, I guarantee you. I've actually mixed this as a demo multiple times, and I guarantee that it is totally possible to find a reverb that works the entire way through the song. I promise. The other thing, I will give you a hint, though, that is going to help you. So let's say we're looking at this vocal again. Yeah, let's look at the vocal. Okay, so we're looking at this guy, these background vocals and their reverb. Great. However, you could argue that maybe it's a little thick sounding in the bottom. So let's do this. I do this all the time. I'm going to grab, whoops. I got to move my face again. Okay, so I'm going to grab an EQ, and I'm going to grab the simplest one. I'm going to grab the EQ3 that we've been using from Pro Tools this whole time. Okay? I don't want any of this. I want the high pass and the low pass. I'm going to bring that high pass up to 400 hertz. I'm just going to obliterate anything below that from going into the reverb. I'm also going to slightly even pull back on the high end that goes to the reverb. By feeding less content to the reverb will not be so thick and in the way. See how now the reverb's just kind of airy and kind of stays out of the way of everything? This is literally called the Abbey Road trick. At Abbey Road, if you want to use one of their reverb chambers, obviously not, this was back in the day before they had digital reverbs. If you wanted to use one of their reverb chambers, there was an EQ set to this in their studios that if you used one of their chambers, you got this. You didn't have control. It wasn't in the studio. It was actually it was locked in another room. So if you were going to use their space, you couldn't send anything below 400 hertz to the reverb because this was pretty much welded in place. It was just the thing that they did. Every recording you've heard come out of EMI or Abbey Road Studios up until the 70s has this filter on it, on the reverb. Every last one of them. So you can still totally use that trick, and it allows you're going to find that the reverb isn't as thick. So when you use it over a whole mix, totally stays out of the way of all the other instruments. And it actually, if I'm sure you noticed, it allowed me to turn it up because if it takes up less space sonically, I can get it up higher because it's going to take up more of less space, if that makes sense, as opposed to being this giant carpet that I can't get up any higher without getting in the way. If it's restricted, then I can totally get it in that space right there. Okay. I'm going to go back to the meat and get off the stream here.